Welcome to the Retail is Detail podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Hamer. This is where we go beyond the headlines and get into how great retailers and tech innovators really think, from trading to teams to business building to tech, loyalty, and data. Every Monday afternoon, I talk to the people building, running, and reinventing retail, unpacking what's working, what's changing, and what's next. If you care about the detail of retail, you're in the right place. I'm here with Alex Schlagman, the founder of Save the High Street. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
Pleasure. Alex, you're a serial entrepreneur and founder. Founded Save the High Street, JoinJo, the Pocket Street app. How did you get here, and what were the key points in that journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been building technology businesses from sort of pre-university days. I'd always been interested in tech, and the family had been in retail. Grandparents were butchers, the parents were in the rag trade. So like I'd grown up in retail. But I was always really interested in how technology and particularly the internet is local, not just global as well. And that actually a lot of the narrative, particularly if we go back to about 2013, was very much the death of the high street, driven by technology, innovation. And for me, fundamentally, we needed to find a way to merge the best bits of the brick and mortar world and technology to create a better connected, more digitally enabled high street of the future. And so all this talk of the death of the high street, led by this media narrative that people were buying into, for me, didn't just feel premature, it just felt wrong. It felt wrong on so many levels. It felt like if we did move towards that world, the ramification and implication for so many people would be disastrous. But fundamentally, I just felt that the best bits of online and offline would eventually come together, and we'd have a much more elegant, joined up, omnichannel, phygital type experience moving forward. And as a result, when I was reading things, I remember the first Portas review that really painted the picture of the work that needed to be done on the high street, and loads of really good things even painted back then, but very much positioned the internet as the enemy, where I was like, maybe there's something more important to be built here, where we effectively build towards a new high street that's enabled by the internet.
And what do you think is the media agenda in portraying the high street as dying? Why are they doing
look, I think fundamentally it's about, how do you capture the attention? And negative stories do sell. We've made a stand at SaveTheHighStreet.org to be this positive voice based in fact, based in the situation and the data today, but telling the other side of the story of, the emergence of a stronger high street, a high street where vacancy presents opportunities, where the challenges of innovation and technology present opportunities, where we can work better together as an industry. But the stock response in media will always be to find the story that drives that emotional reaction. And that usually is the challenges facing high streets.
Well, what does the data tell us at the moment? Is the high street in a good place?
Yeah. So we've got a lot of challenges, but some of those biggest challenges are actually presenting some of the most important opportunities for high streets. So if we look at some of these here, vacancy rates at the moment, if we look across high streets, shopping centers, and even across markets, we've seen a number of the big national chains who really defined high streets in a lot of people's eyes for generations, either shrinking or disappearing entirely from high street, leaving many gaps, whether they're big gaps like an ex-Debenhams building, or there's a whole range of new gaps emerging when a smaller chain goes under. Now, when we've got those gaps, what we're seeing is actually there is an entrepreneurial energy in the UK today from businesses, whether they're retail, restaurant, cafe, salons, barbers, services, products, hospitality, people who want to activate space. And what this additional vacancy pressure is causing is effectively pushing the real estate owner and manager towards looking at new solutions about how do we incubate this new generation of entrepreneurs to come through with access to space on the kind of terms which are more acceptable in tomorrow's world. Now, we think about, starting a business today. A lot of people, maybe even listening into the podcast, maybe digital first brands or technology first businesses. And you're used to being able to spin up a website in a day and then take it down the next day. The idea of signing 5-year leases with upward only rent reviews from day one is not really in the kind of mindset of the next generation of entrepreneurs coming through. But if we can give people options to actually try out their offering before they make long-term commitments, wrapped with the right type of support, what we're finding is that not only are lots of businesses really interested in that, but actually once you give the right types of businesses the opportunity to test out space for, let's just say, 3 months, they don't want to leave. So we've got this very high conversion rate on these new incubator propositions that are rolling out in different shopping centres and town centres. The other things we're seeing is that there's a changing shape in the types of businesses that are on high streets. And it's not that it's necessarily the end of retail per se, but it's definitely the end of commoditized retail, which doesn't think towards actually, how do I provide something more than just basically trying to ship the same product that someone can find exactly in the same way online without any added value, experience or service, but leverages the differentiation of your physical space. And we are seeing a lot of interesting new concepts emerging onto high streets. We're helping different types of businesses launch businesses that may not have been there before, but also businesses that are trying to rethink very old industries, florists who actually want to do things in a very modern way. So we've got this emergence now of people coming through, a new generation of entrepreneurs facing off directly against probably the biggest visible problem facing high streets of vacancy, and actually giving us an opportunity to fundamentally regenerate and change high streets for the better from the bottom up.
Well, before we move on, can you give an example of a really innovative business you've seen recently that's, maybe done this incubation, persevered after 3 months, continued and embodies this concept?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of different examples, maybe one for a new concept, one for an older concept. We've been helping quite a lot of what look like sort of relatively conventional type offerings, but done in a very modern way, launch into high streets. So one springs to mind maybe is Rita Botanicals down in Guildford. Rita Botanicals won one of our incubator competitions that allowed her to basically trade for 3 months, wrapped around with a load of business support to basically get her to a point where hopefully she would be in a position to sign a lease, a longer term lease or a license agreement, at least that's commercial, that makes sense for both landlord and tenant. She loves and is passionate about plants. She was trading a little bit in the markets, but she'd never had a physical store. But she had all those core attributes you really look for in the entrepreneur: willing to run through a brick wall to make it work, deeply passionate about the trade and the offering, and really open and adaptive to new ideas. And so we worked with her to really put together a new business plan to launch her into this space in Guildford, and then wrapped around a load of extra support. We'll talk a bit more maybe about Thriver, where we can kind of automate a lot of the work. We ramped up her capacity to do a lot more marketing, for example, and support her around things to do with fitting out the store, the team required, the recruitment for that team, financial systems in place, forecasts, etc. And at the end of that 3-month period, she's now into a 5-year lease commitment with the landlord. So these were challenged units that were historically difficult to let to larger sort of national and regional chains. And as a result, business like Rita Botanicals and 2 others in that particular centre came through 3 months and then took the long-term lease. Slightly different concepts we're working with as well, where we're saying, actually, how do we curate high streets slightly differently? We took 6 units in Southend in a centre called the Victoria Centre. We had 250 businesses applied in a month. We selected those 6 winners who've all now moved on to the next stage in their agreement after the initial incubation period. But we're really looking at how do we get the right mix of offerings to create almost a bit of a destination for that particular part of the shopping centre. So we put in there 3 different vintage offerings with different complementary propositions to create a bit of a vintage hub, as well as a yoga studio and 2 other businesses that had a kind of hybrid of a bit of F&B and experiential as well as retail into the mix to create something we now call the bridge as the overall offering between the 6 businesses. And then finally, we sometimes look towards actually people who are trying to do different concepts. So, an example that jumps out to me is a business called Candid Studios, won one of our competitions and is now trading in West London. And Candid Studios is doing something that's working really well in Asia, which is like pop-up photo booths, effectively, but really marketed and built well, and a great brand around it all. And it kind of plays to this generation of people that really want to have, either from a business point of view or even from a personal branding point of view, a much better profile, and really tapping into something different for high streets as well. So see all kinds of things. We've said we're getting hundreds of businesses apply each local area we launch here. And there's no shortage of entrepreneurial energy in the UK or ideas. And there's tons of people who are passionate about the trade. The challenge is not just getting onto the high street, but also building a business just requires so many hats, Jamie. Big businesses have teams of people with agencies, consultants, and big budgets supporting marketing, finance, operations, HR, ... Small businesses, the entrepreneur is often expected to do everything alone. So a big focus of ours here is how do we radically change the economics and experience of building these businesses by putting a team of AI agents to work for every single local business to run the business side so they can focus on what they love doing and succeed.
And is that team of AI agents, is that the Pocket High Street app?
No, so business I run the parent company called Together Futures.
Yeah.
We own the industry movement savethehighstreet.org, as well as the AI for local high street entrepreneurs, which is called Thriver at hellothriver.com.
Okay. Very cool. And how do you prioritize your own time? Looking at you as an entrepreneur, I mean, you have various ventures. How do you prioritize one thing over the other, and what are you spending most of your time on currently?
I mean, firstly, within the group, we've got a lot to prioritize. But what I've historically not been is one of those entrepreneurs who's had multiple businesses, multiple interests. I don't have, a property portfolio and lots of interest in lots of different businesses that I'm running. I admire people who've got that, but it's so immersive, Jamie, building one thing. And so my focus for years now has really been about how do we enable the future high street from the bottom up and fundamentally change what it means to start, scale, and every step in between as a local business. Within this, I think there is this journey I know a lot of entrepreneurs go on around really understanding how do you let go of certain things, even if you're very close to those, to people in the team. Unfortunately, I'm at a stage in the journey now where I've got a very strong leadership team around me. So I've got a very strong head of products, got a very strong head of growth and COO, CTO. But as the CEO of the group, there are certain things that really do still sit across each one of those teams. And I make sure that I'm still close to all parts of the business without being too hands-on. The key thing for me is really understanding what are the things where I can add most value every single week and every single month. So depending on what's happening, right now we're preparing to launch national campaigns around the UK. We've been rolling out pilots of Thriver in the UK over the last year, and it's now ready to open up on a national foot. And I'm very close to a lot of the work that's going on to reposition Save the High Street and the work that we're doing to bring Thriver to market, while at the same time looking at our own funding journey. So we set up a company last year called Together Futures. We acquired the IP of Save the High Street and basically built Thriver in the last year. And now we're moving on to our institutional funding phase ourselves. So there's a lot of work that goes into that side of things that fall very squarely on the CEO. And then finally, a lot of this is about people as well. So I see a big part of the CEO's role in HR at the core. And it's really about how do you attract, retain, incentivize, and empower the best people in the industry to come and work for you when, frankly, they could go work for big companies and earn a lot more money on a monthly basis. And so culturally, we've got a group of people that are really very much mission-led and specialized in their own area. But everyone in our business is very much on their own mission to achieve something that aligns to the overall missions of the business. And I see a key part of my role about making sure we find people that have aligned missions and can be really motivated, as well as having those core capabilities, and then being a real champion for the continued focus around that alignment of personal mission into the business's mission. Ultimately, if we're going to build something really special with a group of people, how do we ensure individually that everyone in the team is motivated beyond just clocking in, clocking out on a 9 to 5? I think that's a really important characteristic of the companies I admire the most, and something that we've really aimed to build here internally at Together Futures, Save the High Street, and Fiverr, is this very motivated team that have a bigger why behind why they're here. Sometimes it's very much around the overall market. Other times it's about really achieving something substantive in terms of radically improving the economics of building businesses forever. And other times it's more domain specific and an opportunity to create a platform for that individual to have a really big impact in their very much specific domain area. So I really make sure that I have some time associated to really looking at the team, not so much in terms of their day-to-day performance, but in terms of, do we have a group of people here that are doing everything in their power to become the best version of themselves, aligning to this mission?
And so what's keeping you awake at night at the moment? Business challenges, high street decline, something unexpected?
Yeah, I mean, maybe less around the conventional answer to that, but I don't sleep a lot in the week, and I know there's a balancing act. I'm not technically an insomniac, but I think most entrepreneurs that I know are either using the very late nights or the very early mornings to get certain work done that just can't be done in the madness of the day. And
Yeah.
so, almost building a little bit on your previous question as well, there is a need for certain quiet time work, in this role, as well as the nature of the days, which is often very booked up with need to interact with a lot of different people, whether it's a podcast like this or a series of meetings or internal facing meetings. And so I often spend a lot of the time, maybe other people are asleep, working on things that I just can't get done when everyone's awake. You get left alone in a different way in those hours. You get left alone when your phone isn't buzzing away, when it's not just your calendar. Nobody's going to want a meeting with you at, 2 in the morning or 5 in the morning. But the reality is, you also kind of just know there's something subconscious, the world is sleeping. And as a result, you can get more into the flow, whether you're coding, whether you're writing, whether you're thinking. Those quiet times are very important. I think for me, we're going through a big shift in the world. The other thing that thinking a lot about here, and we've been operating through the most transformational period in the history of high streets now for many years. And I think that period of change is a great opportunity, as I've talked about, a great opportunity to spin those biggest challenges into some of the great opportunities for high streets. But I also feel like the industrial revolution level shift in the future of work that's unfolding is now very visible to people. And we here in our team have been talking about the opportunity to build what's now really referred to as sort of agentic application layer AI products on top of the work that was done with the foundation models, to effectively solve problems in new ways for different audiences, and that we will all have co-pilots that make our lives easier and our work more productive. And our lens here about building that AI co-pilot for the high street entrepreneur feels as relevant now as it ever did. But there is this wider context about, what does it mean to work in this future? Now, from our point of view, we are very clear on the lens that there are a number of things, jobs, tasks, if you like, that businesses in our market, whether they're independent retail, cafe, salons, barbers, or whatever they might be, have to do today in the old world that have never really wanted to do, and as a result neglect. They don't have the time, the skills, the money, and in a lot of cases, the interest to do every single job that a full-formed business needs to do. So we think that agentic AI solves a really important problem here in terms of being able to radically change the economics of getting jobs done to a human quality standard. But in the wider space here, that there are big questions that we need to ask ourselves in the AI ethics debate about what will purpose look like in this future world. And so one of the big things we're really focused on building towards here is enabling a new generation of people who are passionate about things that can use physical space. You know, if you may not be able to get the job in the marketing agency or the accountancy firm or on a sales desk or whatever it might be, because those jobs don't exist anymore, can we enable you to express your passions in a way that we can help turn them into businesses? Whether you know love making people look beautiful, we can enable you to open up pop-up salons and boutiques, or whether you're super passionate about trainers and we can help you build an upcycled secondhand trainer boutique of some sort, or whatever it might be. Yeah, how do we get that passion economy firing with a lens on physical space and enable people with the space and support they need to actually turn their great passions and ideas into sustainable businesses in a world where a lot of the old jobs won't exist? So we have quite a lot of we've had quite a lot of philosophical debates about this and around our vision and our passion and what we're doing on that journey to enable a world where small businesses can succeed by just focusing on what they love doing and what that means for the next generation, whether they're coming out of university or being displaced because a lot of the old jobs will no longer exist for them in this capacity.
To clarify, we're not recording this episode at 2 a.m., although I would have been very open to it. And Alex, you mentioned letting people follow their passions and do what they're good at. What are the current occupants of the high street, or the traditional occupants of the high street, not that good at that agentic AI can really help with?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a general theme that if you look at the independent high streets, yeah, whatever kind of sector we're talking about within that, whether it's a restaurant, a retailer, a cafe, a salon, whatever it might be, almost invariably across the board, you find people that absolutely love the trade. They love cutting hair, cooking food, making the product. And not only do they love it, usually, and I'm sure people listening into the podcast will agree, when you go to a good independent business, you find that you get a good product and service. You may be challenged in other areas, but you find that there's a certain passion that comes behind that you don't find as readily available, at the national chains. But what we do see at the same time is, while you've got these businesses that are super passionate and usually very competent at delivering that great product or service, the core magic that makes them, start that business and get up every day in the morning, there is so many jobs associated to running an overall business that are underloved and under-resourced. So marketing is a big one. We put a big lens on here. And, if you're a local retail business, the amount that you could be doing to really optimize your ability to not just attract local footfall and sales, but build a really successful omnichannel business is a whole different set of skills. Whether that is continuously building out and purposely focusing around your social media presence, whether it is about CRM and customer audiences, or even at the basics of just sending a newsletter, through to managing and dealing with the online reputation challenges, all the component parts of e-commerce. I know, Jamie, you're very focused around component parts of this as well, that are just not fit for, just not naturally in the wheelhouse of having an entrepreneur tinker and optimize around like you would typically get with digital first brands building out on the website. Yep. They're much busier in the store, working with the customers, focused on the product, focused on the supply side. And then if you go beyond marketing and all the different things that could be done from a local marketing and online marketing point of view, you start to get into a world of saying, well, actually, when you get under this and you look at how small businesses are managing their finances at the moment, and it's just not at the standard you would hope, it's not everybody, but there is a mass challenge in the high street of businesses who do not have sophisticated systems around managing things like their cash flows, setting appropriate sales targets, really understanding how to budget for the year ahead. So the kind of things you would expect to see a finance department in a big business do just doesn't get done to the basic levels. So really, there's a whole financial planning piece, which is a challenge. Team and HR is another major obstacle and hurdle for a lot of businesses today, and dealing with people-related challenges, whether that is about recruiting people, whether that is about incentivizing and managing people, whether that is even about dealing with people where there are challenges as well, can cause a lot of stress and challenge. And so the concept of an SOP, a standard operating procedure, is something that we sort of brought into a lot of small businesses, where we basically bring in so people have a standardized way of looking at every single task that's personalized to their business. And so these kind of operational procedures that you see in larger businesses often don't exist in smaller businesses today. And so bringing those in can create a kind of standard and a much improved economic efficiency around operations as well. So really, if you start just to think about the different departments that a normal big business would have, and actually when you start dwelling into it, if it's not directly related to that core of the product or service, chances are a bulk of the market on high streets today don't have the time, the money, the skills, or in a lot of cases, the interest to do it themselves.
So you mentioned sort of the marketing as one key vertical, finance, and because these aren't core companies for these people, does that predicate needing pre-made tools to plug and play? I mean, presumably these usually aren't tech people who are going to develop the tools themselves.
So with a small business owner, having kind of generic content and guidelines just isn't enough. We've been there at Save the High Street. We've run human-based support programs. We provide tons of content to people. The reality is, even though the front end of the challenge is often there's just so many things to be doing, like just knowing what to do next is the first challenge. So we've been building technology around effectively recommendation engines that learn about your business and can understand what's the best thing to do next based on the context of you and your goals, your performance at the moment, and even over time, understanding the environmental factors around your business, changes in weather, new competitions, events happening. So thinking like the human brain. So there's a gap here, firstly, around how do we help businesses guide towards the right things to do in the right order. But even when you've got that in place, the next challenge emerges, which is, okay, that's great. You've told me what to do next. Now, how do I do this when, again, like I said, they don't have the time, the money, the skills, or in a lot of cases, the interest to do that particular job? And you can't expect one person to be wanting to do everything, let alone be good at everything. And with small businesses, if you haven't got the money to outsource everything in a conventional sense to freelancers and agencies and consultants, or recruiting a new team member for that, they just get stuck. They go, great, I've got all of these things that are now on a to-do list, but I need that to-do list done for me.
Yeah.
And so this is where, for us, automation comes in. So we've effectively been systematically working through the individual jobs that are most important to high street entrepreneurs and effectively building agentic tools to automate the work that used to be done by a human, but at the click of a button to a human quality standard without the marginal costs, so that we can make it affordable for people to get a lot more done, whether that's running your social media or taking over very discrete individual tasks like, building a brand kit for your market.
In terms of this journey, like you mentioned going from sort of more analog tools to, how quickly is this accelerating? How quickly have you moved into agentic AI? Where did this idea come from? And how quickly have you been able to deploy these tools?
Yeah, good question. I mean, so we first started talking about the concept of a self-driving business back in 2019. So we'd, at Save the High Street, we'd basically set up a research group to study what works on the high street from the bottom up, with input from lots of businesses. We had over 1,000 businesses contribute towards the research, and we had over 50 industry experts in different domains contribute towards this as well. And a few things came through. Firstly, the sort of reaffirmation of our kind of core mission that actually the future is small, it's smaller, and there's actually a need for a lot more smaller businesses, and that the challenges facing those businesses were very clear. From a market point of view, there were a number of things that we wanted to see happen, but within the business itself, there were really important things that we needed to see change around improving the economics and impact of supporting these businesses. So conventionally, when we sort of kicked this off on this journey and we saw this challenge, we decided to say, well, look, how do we start with a vision of a technology platform, but actually really get on the ground and understand what it takes to run these businesses? So we built out more capability in the team of people who'd actually run high street businesses before, and actually started to build much more, if you like, a human-led consultancy in this area, but one that instead of requiring the businesses to pay conventional consultancy fees for, we would partner with the industry. We'd partner with local authorities and business improvement districts and others like landlords, for example, who wanted to see their businesses do better. And we'd run very discrete programs to get under what it takes to make them more successful. We'd take over parts of their business. We'd build them a new business plan. And in the process of doing this, we would start to understand systematically what it takes to take these individual jobs and work out how can we automate them. Then in 2022, 23, we started on a new journey as an industry with the lens of, okay, right, so GPTs shined a light on what's possible. And it's now possible to see a future of generative AI actually in action. And so I think when we started on our journey, we talked about this idea of a self-driving business. My CTO at the time said, great, give me 20 billion in 20 years, which is probably quite accurate on the 20 billion, but maybe he didn't need 20 years if we could have recruited the OpenAI team. But we weren't in a position to do that. We weren't there ready to build an AI lab. That wasn't in our DNA as much. We were much more suited at the layer above. And so when we saw that emergence, for us, that was a signal that all of this groundwork that we'd been doing, building towards something that could fundamentally change the economics and experience of building these businesses, would become possible. And so when the API started to be opened up into a lot of the foundation models and the multimodal models, we started to realize that actually now is a moment in time to be able to build really important businesses that solve discrete problems for particular audiences, if you have a deeper perspective and understanding around the audience and the problem, and as a result can really iterate and build a better product layer. It's about the tech, but more about the product, that you can access and use proprietary data or proprietary mix of data about your audience to improve context and effectively experience for that product. And thirdly, and really importantly at this stage here, that you've got differentiated distribution. So if you're building at this layer of the market, you're trying to build a product that is the AI for ... whether it's the AI for sales teams or doctors or traders or whatever it might be. You need those three big component parts, was our thesis: better product, better data, and better distribution. And when you've got that in place, because there is this unbelievable development path that the foundation models are on, as you develop and improve your work, your technology and your product, and that technology is improving underlying this, you have this almost like this multiplier effect, kind of effectively reinforcing the work you're doing by the work that's happening beneath you, to create effectively things that a few years ago would have seemed like sci-fi. And so where we are at the moment, it suddenly feels very real to start talking about the idea of a self-driving business, a world where small businesses focus on just the things they care about and succeed, and everything else can be done by your non-human team. Sam Altman at OpenAI talks about, the first, unicorn $1 billion startup has already been started that will not actually have any employees beyond the founder. And we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But in our context, where we're dealing with the SME local businesses, we see this possibility in a very real sense, particularly from the back office point of view, that a small business can actually run a really well functioning back office team, marketing, finance, operations, HR, without needing to spend the time themselves or the money that historically it used to require to do so. And as a result, they can focus on just building the best product and the best experience and becoming a true entrepreneur, working with their new sort of AI team.
Very cool. So now you mentioned partnering with local councils, major property companies, different diverse groups. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about how the different stakeholders think about the future of retail?
Yeah. Well, I mean, firstly, it might surprise people, might not, but it's in everybody's interest for this to work. And it's interesting. I've done these kind of things with a political sense, so I like debating a politician or things like that. You never get people, who want to be on the other side of the argument. Everybody wants to see high streets, markets, shopping centres change for the better. I mean, are the reasons we want to live in some places, not others. They are the fuel that powers local economies and connects local communities. They're the places we interact in the real world. It's not a future people want to live into, that we just sort of live in our homes behind our phones. That people want to have this vibrant, dynamic town centre that enables entrepreneurship to thrive. What we do see, though, is that the individual stakeholders across the market have a lot of nuanced requirements and drivers. And so one of the sort of the key things we've learned about building out Save the High Street as a sort of movement that allows all of those different stakeholder partners to play a role and benefit and have this kind of wider positive impact on the overall raising of the tide for high streets, is that you need to talk to people very differently. We're revamping at the moment all of our kind of web assets. There's a whole conversation about our page for our property partners needs to look very different to our page from our place partners, because even though there's very similar set of things that we might be doing, we need to talk about them very differently, because the problems they're facing that these solutions solve are actually different problems. And the language that we use, my head of partnerships came from a world much more closer to local government and had a real steep learning curve dealing with landlords, developers, agents, asset managers, and vice versa. You come from the other side, suddenly you've got to talk to local authorities and business improvement districts and community groups and trade associations. Everybody's got their own kind of vocabulary. Everybody's got their own sort of KPI framework, even though it's all driving towards the same ultimate goals. So really mapping and understanding those drivers has been a big thing for us.
So talking about the metrics, the traditional metrics, football conversion, basket size, might not accurately capture the community value and the overall benefit to society of high street shops. What alternative success metrics should we be looking at and using?
Look, for us, we get really excited when we see businesses start and businesses on a path towards achieving their potential. And so there are bigger things going on with high streets. And look, we could have spent the whole time, if you wanted, talking about parking or business rates. But for us, the thing that we get really excited about, where we think we're really useful in the future of high streets, is how do we make an impact one business at a time? Bottom up, we talk about it. One business, one place, one property. And as a result of that impact, move on to the next and have the same impact again. And so for us, there's the really exciting things for us are how many businesses want to start, how many businesses are starting, and how much are those businesses doing? One of the key North Star metrics we're looking at here, the intersect of Save the High Street and Thriver, is really how do we enable businesses to do so much more? I mean, Nike's famous slogan of just do it. I mean, it needs to be a little bit more nuanced than that, because it is about do the right thing and do it well. Don't get me wrong, or do it to an industry good standard. But often one of the big challenges we've seen for small businesses is they have so many things they could be doing, and they're not really doing very much at all on working on the business. They're doing a lot of work in the business, and it takes a lot of their time to do that. And it takes a ton of time to really obsess about anything. If you want to build literally the best Italian food restaurant, and you want to build, the best version of yourself from there, and that's where you've come from, you should be spending more of your time on that side of things. But what we like to see is that across the scope of things that are aligned to our action plans we put in place for these businesses, that these businesses are in action, that suddenly there's a lot more going on, that businesses are working way harder to attract more footfall, that businesses have all of the core foundational capabilities and practices in place that we like to see across the high street. And so for us, it's really kind of bottom-up metrics that get us excited because we understand the link back to high streets as a whole. Not to say that it isn't important as an industry that we talk about certain things. And one of the key things that people talk about, and we're launching a campaign about it that really tells that story in practice around footfall. Footfall, big metric, a big driver here. And obviously it looks on surface like a vanity metric, but actually, if you do optimize to get people back into town centers or optimize to get people through the door, even if you're not thinking as much about selling them something. So really pertinent with a product retail hat on here is, how do you think about yourself in the entertainment business? How do you think about yourself as somebody that is there to really attract people to and engage them, and understand that as a byproduct, money will follow, whether they buy from you there or they buy from you online? Can you win their attention? And then can you win their engagement? And then can you win the first sale? And then can you win as a result of that more in terms of the love of that experience or product, of the products or services they received, and they want to share it again? But don't start with, I want to sell someone something. Start with something, I want to entertain someone about something. Another example around this that might be fruitful, we've been looking at a lot of these big spaces, like big empty department stores. What can be done with an old Debenhams? And how do you transform them so that they're fit for the future? And we've been asked to look at a few of these. We've got a pilot project about one in West London. We filled it with 34 independent traders on Thriver. And now as a result, we think this is a really big opportunity to change high streets and shopping centers for the better really quickly. So the question is, how do you make that happen? How do you turn a big empty Debenhams into something that's fit for the future? And so we asked ourselves the question of, what does a future department store look like? And we brought in certain operators who've been doing really interesting things around creating mixed-use, multi-tenant type spaces. And one of those operator partners is a fantastic entrepreneur called Yuri Michel, who's built was behind a lot of the work Mercato Metropolitano did, known as Trinquet Village in Paris. So he's a real hands-on operator, but he's come much more from the hospitality mindset, and with that hospitality mindset, when you apply that into retail, it's a really powerful combination. When you have a really fundamentally grassroots hospitality guy thinking, like, actually, how do I make something work as an entertainment destination? And of course, we're going to be selling things as part of that customer journey, and tie that together with people who've built retail businesses. It's a really good combination of thinking. So we do need to think about football. We need to think about how do we just fundamentally attract people back to the high streets and the shopping centers and the markets and the town centers that we have, and just into the businesses themselves before even thinking necessarily about the top line metrics. But the stuff that gets us really excited, as I said, is really at the ground zero. It's like, are we seeing that more businesses want to take the spaces that we're opening up through these incubator competitions in the areas we're launching? And do we see that entrepreneurial energy materializing into people being able to build great businesses?
Speaking of getting attention, you mentioned gaining 12 million monthly YouTube views in a month for one of your ventures. What advice do you have personally in terms of a founder brand for capturing attention?
There's different contexts for different types of businesses to some degree, but I think there is an opportunity for people to think more about the why. And there's some really interesting frameworks around how you can use movement dynamics in more businesses than you might realize.
Mm.
And so the concept of an industry movement might seem quite sort of high level and distinct from trying to build a commercial business. I'm not sure if people are listening in and they're actually retailers themselves, or they might be building retail tech startups or whatever they might be thinking here. But one of the first things to always look at is look at the why first. Simon Sinek talks about it really well. Start with the why, you know? And if you start with the why, and you really unpack that and you really understand it, don't just skim over it, really interrogate your why and customer test your why, do proper testing and speak to people about it. You know, is there a way of turning your why into other people's why? You know, can you create something that is more of a business of belonging? Can you create something where your mission becomes something that other people want to align and get behind and be a part of, regardless of whether they're a customer or a formal partner or an affiliate or any kind of commercial relationship? Just outside of that, can you create something that other people want to align to in some way? And when you're in a position to answer that question with a yes, there's lots of tactical things that you can do to then effectively radically ramp up your marketing effectiveness by effectively building something that other people can get behind and mobilizing their support. So rather than putting your, dollars towards just requiring on direct response paid media, that might be a part of your mix. But actually, can you do something which actually changes the economics of your marketing? Can you get your CAC down to near zero by creating a lot of what you're doing as something that the wider stakeholders who have influence and reach to your target audience also want to get behind and share really authentically? And as a result, can you build viral products? Can you build products that by design, are easy to share, but also in terms of the core, the attributes, people just want to share. The real acid test for you is if I'm not paying someone like an affiliate, would they share it? I go even further than that is like, could I turn this product into something I could sell to this person that they would pay? To actually have it rolled out to people. So some of the things that we've been challenging ourselves on with like the accelerators and the incubators have component parts of those built into it. And it's like, actually, these add so much value and we can do extra things on top that actually it makes sense for a third party partner to pay for these to be rolled out. And even if you don't get there with that, it's a good thought experiment for you to go through. So I would say here, look, there's lots of opportunities to expand on channels. There's lots of things that you can do there. But I think the more interesting thing is actually in the messaging side. And can you create something at the core of what you're doing and articulate it in such a way, and then engage and interact with those long tail of influencers and stakeholders who have a vested interest in the success of that why happening to drive your growth more quickly and cost effectively than you imagined possible.
Awesome thoughts. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to ask the questions we asked every guest. In terms of getting into retail, background in retail, parents in retail, what detail of retail do you like the most?
For me, I love the kind of human touch of independent retail. And that's where I've come from here, and there's something about going into a business that has the actual business owner there, where you can feel that passion come through. And so there's something for me about whether or not I buy something there is that interaction I have when I'm, shopping, where I'm actually discovering businesses and actually discovering the stories and the business owners behind it all. I'm an entrepreneur geek. Not only am I an entrepreneur, my friends are entrepreneurs. I geek out about entrepreneurship. I build products for entrepreneurs. And so there's something for me when I'm even in a personal retail environment. I've always geeked out about the entrepreneur story.
Okay. The fact that it is so populated by people starting their own businesses, however small, and some of them get very big.
It's just my thing, just entrepreneurship for me is just fascinating. And I know you're building a podcast on this, Jamie, too. So there's probably some shared thoughts on this side of things, but there's something about that, the adventure and the, that the guts and courage it takes to go and start something, and the stories behind it all, and the shared camaraderie I feel with other entrepreneurs, even if they're in a completely different sector.
That's great. And what detail of retail would you most want to change?
I think the stuff that we're working on, we've come to a conclusion of the things that we really think are most important. And at the core of that, it's just too hard to start and then succeed as a small local business. It's just too hard. We believe in a better future. We believe in a future where it's much easier to get started in your first retail shop or kiosk or market stall. And we believe in a world where small businesses can focus on the things they love doing, and technology will enable those businesses to succeed the easier way.
What's your most controversial prediction for the future of retail?
Well, we've been quite contrarian over the years. I increasingly think I've had this conversation this year that we don't seem to be as contrarian as before. I mean, 2 years ago, we were talking about the kind of idea of self-driving businesses and kind of an AI to run businesses on the high streets. A few years ago, it was very much maybe still contrarian to some people, but we believe that a lot of the most successful digital-first brands will end up becoming omnichannel businesses.
Yep.
And we've seen this, whether these are the biggest brands in the world, the number of concept stores that Amazon set up, the work that goes on across in Asia with businesses like Rakuten and Alibaba, the kind of the scaled platforms doing really, immersive, connected, omni-channel work that join the dots between online and offline in new ways. But increasingly, it's these successful digital first brands that get to a certain point in the journey. They start leveling out in terms of their marketing effectiveness through their sort of core social advertising and paid search type channels. And they start thinking about, actually, how do I take my business to the next level? And it's not just about in terms of, CAC and LTV and conventional, metrics that digital first brands will obsess over, rightly so. But it's also about, actually, what can you do to your brand by actually suddenly becoming a business that interacts both in real world and physical world? How much more can you learn about your customers as a result of actually having physical space? What's the impact that you can have in terms of your online sales in the local areas you open or maybe close businesses, or maybe more flexible leases even? So what is that? What does that future look like in terms of building a digital first retail brand? And we believe it includes local, not just local brands needing to come online. And in a lot of ways, it's really interesting to see it come through. We've run these incubator competitions, Jamie, where we get, sometimes hundreds of businesses apply for a few units in a local town or shopping center in one particular area. And so many of those businesses are digital first brands where they've got to a certain point in the journey and they would just love to have that physical space to trade from, to base from, to take themselves to that next level.
Really interesting. Just going the opposite way around to what it was 5, 10, 15 years ago. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And what is your craziest story thus far from working in or improving retail?
Say that again, Jamie.
What was your craziest story so far from working in retail?
I mean, look, the launch of Save the High Street itself was crazy. I was building out technology businesses, as you know, anyway, with a lens on retail. The original Pocket High Street businesses aim to sort of basically connect the dots between online and offline by building a digital marketplace. And we were starting to open this API up so that other businesses could promote high street businesses' offers and be rewarded, almost like an affiliate network for the high street back in 2016. And so we pivoted from this, two-sided consumer-facing app into a open platform to allow people to sort of connect the dots between, if you like, publishers and the high street businesses themselves at the independent level. And it was at this point here that we were very mission driven back then. I had the team, and we culturally were recruiting only people who were obsessed by this domain, as well as being good in software or good in marketing, whatever it was. But we wanted people that really were obsessive about the domain and the bigger why. And one of the first pieces of media that was talked about was called as the anti-Amazon savior of the high street, which sounded very grandiose at the time. But like everything suddenly started pivoting, all our messaging started pivoting toward the why. We started to engage a lot more with the industry. We started to believe a lot that actually there's a bigger context here than just building a tech business with a why. There's actually something needed to bring different stakeholders across the industry around a shared vision for what the future high street looks like and how we can achieve it together. And a future that's inspiring and modern, a future that really embraces technology at the core as well as collaboration. And so I was introduced to a framework for launching movements, consumer-led revolutions, if you like, by called Jonathan Fields, really interesting thought leader in this space. Sort of 18-step framework around launching an industry movement. And I was helping out a lady who was launching a sort of movement to empower women in business, putting this framework in place. And we just started looking at it in context of our business and our industry. And me and my COO at the time kind of like interrogated it from all sides. And it's an interesting one how our vocabulary changed, because I had seen backers on that business and I was talking to people about it. And I think a few people thought I'd maybe lost my mind, which does happen when you're building these intense businesses. And suddenly he's talking about movements and he's writing a manifesto. And I was basically up all night writing this manifesto through a week. I just completely went into a zone on the whole thing. And then got a whole bunch of people that I respected and believed were important for this industry to kind of contribute towards that manifesto and essentially sort of put their name on a press release. And we didn't know what was going to happen. What we did know is there was space for something. It was like after Brexit, which was a very divisive exercise, whichever side you sat on. And I felt like the industry needed to come together. There's a lot of people sort of saying similar things in different ways. We sort of needed a bigger context, almost like a master brand to get everybody mobilized around. And, but we didn't know what was going to happen. We hadn't set like big targets, and we didn't have a whole roadmap of everything we would do with Save the High Street. We wanted to bring something together that mobilized people, and that ideally we could set up a bit of a research group was the original start point here, to study what works on the high street from the bottom up. But that first weekend, it went the press release we put out there, and this never happened before. It's not like I'd had this history of like press releases going completely ballistic. Yep. But the first weekend, it went into the Times and the Mail, and then the Sunday Times and the Sunday Mail. Like all the nationals showcased it on the first weekend, and then a big outdoor media company got in touch with us like a week or two later saying, can we talk and maybe we can do something together? And they basically plastered Save the High Street around the UK on outdoor ads. And suddenly this was something here with thousands of businesses and community champions getting in touch saying that this is actually something that we need. And it was just a landing page. It was a landing page with a manifesto at the time that was maybe more inclusive to sort of a technology first vision that was positive for the high street. And so our business, and we went through our own challenges there, and we started that evolution away from what was Pocket High Street to becoming much more of a kind of fundamentally, how do we change business support forever? Which then led us to set up the new business, which is built Thriver. But there's a journey, that little moment in time through the autumn into the winter of 2016 into 2017, where we actually started what became a movement that people could get behind and be a part of, which was a whole different vocabulary and skill set and a new set of learnings for personally, on my personal level. I brought in a couple of people that were passionate and geeked out about this as well. But from a personal level, it was it was a real shift in our journey, a bit of a crazy story that kind of defined the future years ahead.
If people don't think you're a bit mad as an entrepreneur, then you're doing it wrong.
Be a bit different, at least. Think independently. Come from your own, deep rooted perspective about what it is, and don't try and just follow the crowd. Listen to what people have got to say, but come to your own first principle conclusions on things.
Awesome, Alex. It's been great. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
That's it for today's episode of Retail is Detail. This episode was brought to you by Loxa, the Klarna for insurance, protecting every retail customer everywhere. We support retailers in offering product protection on all major platforms, online and in-store, on all insurable categories. Visit loxacover.com to find out more. You can catch previous episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or at retailersdetailpodcast.com. I've been your host, Jamie Hamer. Thanks for listening, and see you next Monday.